Hello, a big thanks from TSNN for joining us today. All TSNN webinars are brought to you by OnStream Media, the leader in multimedia webinar and webcasting services. Thanks for your sponsorship. Their technology can help you get better results for your own organization. OnStream's virtual event solutions can connect you with colleagues and customers, extend the value of your events, and boost profits. Webinars and webcasts provide a platform for branded virtual events that can enhance the value of a live show or operate as single revenue-generating events. For a free demo and to learn more about how OnStream webinars and webcasts bring measurable ROI, visit onstreammedia.com. And now let me introduce you to our speaker today. Exhibit marketing strategist Marlis Arnold has not only been an exhibitor, but also the organizer of several expos and events. This unique perspective of the industry allows her to share insights with show managers as well as both beginning and experienced exhibitors at events ranging from local consumer expos to some of the largest trade shows in the U.S. She's the host of the Trade Show Insights blog podcast, author of Build a Better Trade Show Image and the Exhibitor Ed Education Success System, and founder of the Exhibit Marketers Cafe. Earlier this year, she published the Exhibitor Education Manifesto on exactly what exhibitor education is and isn't and why it matters to you. Marlis, over to you.
Thanks, Arlene. And I would like to introduce our two guest panelists today. First of all, we have Kelly Faith, who is Operations Manager for PAC Expo, which is run by PMMI, based in Reston, Virginia. Kelly's responsible for the trade show operations to produce PAC Expo, including vendor relations and signage requirements. She joined PMMI in 2001 and has progressively managed the operations for PAC Expo for 12 years. PMMI is a trade association representing 600-plus packaging and processing supply chain companies that provide a full range of packaging and processing machinery, materials, components, and containers. And our second panelist is Tom Carbett, who is Senior Vice President of Exhibitions for the Trade Show Association MHI, which is based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Tom is primarily responsible for the sales and operations for MHI's ProMat and MODEX exhibitions. And MHI consists of 800 member companies that are based throughout the world and represent the leading providers of material handling and logistics solutions in today's marketplace. Tom has been with MHI since 1992 and has held progressively responsible positions in sales, marketing, education, and industry relations. Prior to joining MHI, he held senior-level sales, advertising, and marketing positions for Occidental Petroleum, Duff Norton, and Portasol Industries, and he estimates he has been an exhibitor in over 300 different trade shows throughout his career. So I would just like to say that I've had the privilege of working with both of these people and helping them and their exhibitors with exhibitor education, and I know they have great things to share with you today. First off, I would just like to ask both of you how long you've been offering exhibitor education. We're going to get a lot more in depth on what you offer and how, but how long have you been offering exhibitor education and why did you decide to offer it? Kelly?
Sure, thanks, Marlis. We have offered some form of exhibitor training for many years. Starting back in the 1990s, we did on-site training sessions in Chicago, actually at McCormick Place. During the Chicago year, our show does alternate. In the even years, it's in Chicago, and in the odd years, it's in Las Vegas. After 9/11, we started doing webinars in 2002 for both Chicago and the Vegas shows, and since 2002, we have done a couple of on-site seminars in Chicago. And our philosophy is that education will help exhibitors understand how best to attract and engage attendees to visit their booth. So we feel that in order to foster that, we feel education is extremely important.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. And Tom, how about you?
Thank you, Marlis. We actually formalized, I guess, our first exhibitor education back in 1992, and that was kind of the starving artist version of it. We had staff people that would assemble information and travel around to different venues in the country, and anybody that came would get a 3-ring binder with about 7,000 pages in it, and everything that we could find that was pertinent to our industry. And from there, we've progressed. We've tried to utilize professionals that are in the industry, and such as yourself and others that can deliver the message, but also make sure that the content is relevant. So we, like Kelly, we've had a variety of different mechanisms for delivering education, ranging from face-to-face, day and a half type of programs to a combination of face-to-face and webinars, and that's currently where we're at today. We normally will have a face-to-face event once a year, and then webinars that normally will kick off about 3 months prior to the event itself, and then we'll roll through the event for another month after that. So, and they're all done and designed so that they could be portable and they're archived. So we wanted to make it very easy for people to get it when it was most convenient for them.
Well, and I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, too, is that education does come in many forms and many methods and at many different points in time. We're going to talk about all of those things today. And you all are going to hear a lot more from these two guest experts here throughout the call. But first of all, I want to give you a little bit of background. Arlene mentioned the Exhibitor Education Manifesto. And the reason, what inspired that was last year, the Center for Exhibition Industry Research, or CEIR, issued a report, How the Exhibit Dollar is Spent. And in that report, they showed that of the $24 billion spent annually on exhibit marketing in the U.S., a whopping 1% goes to staff training. And we were having a little bit of a conversation before the recording started about how shocking that is on one hand, but when you really stop and think, if you've walked any shows lately and seen, it really isn't surprising that that's all that gets spent on staff training. But it's really sad because if you think about it, most exhibitors, and probably those of you listening in today, didn't go to school to learn how to be an exhibit marketer. And probably a lot of you don't even do it full time. You probably have some other job title, and exhibiting is part of your job. Maybe you're director of marketing or director of sales, or maybe you're in a small company where you do all different kinds of things. So, there's just not enough education out there. And a different CEIR study says that educated exhibitors are up to 68% more effective than those who haven't been educated. So that's where, to me, it seems like there's this big disconnect of, hardly anybody's doing anything on exhibitor training, but yet educated exhibitors are hugely more effective than those that aren't. So, and when we talk about more effective, it's things like, they have better ROI, they produce more qualified quality leads, they waste less time, energy, and money, and avoid a lot of pitfalls. So, it's really, there's a lot of benefits to education. And we're going to talk about the title today was Busting the Myths. So we're going to talk about three major primary myths that I think are probably the biggest reasons that stop people from offering education. And, we're talking about on the exhibitor level, but also on the show organizer level, why the show organizers should be providing some education as well. Before we get any further into the myths, I do want to remind everybody, though, if you have questions, be sure and type those in the chat as we go along, and we'll do a question and answer session towards the end. But feel free to go ahead and type in your question at any point. Arlene is monitoring those for us. So let's jump into myth number one. Our exhibitors already know what they're doing. Well, based on first of all what I've seen at a lot of shows, and second of all based on the response I've gotten from exhibitors across the country over the years, that's really not the case. I mean, I've had so many exhibitors come up to me after a workshop and say, wow, I've been exhibiting for 8, 12, 15 years, however many shows, and nobody has ever offered any kind of education before. I learned things today that I didn't know I could be doing or could do differently. And so I think, again, a lot of us learned by trial and error or by watching other exhibitors. And so even if, exhibitors look like or you think they know what they're doing, they don't necessarily. Just because there's been a fair level of success doesn't mean that they can't improve. There's always room for improvement. So when we talk about exhibitor education, there are different audiences and different needs. And I would say there's three primary audiences. The first being entrepreneurs and small businesses, or you could also put in this category first-time exhibitors. You know, these are the people that only exhibit occasionally, maybe they never have at all. They really don't have any idea where to begin. I mean, if you could really think back to the very first time you ever did a trade show, you probably would remember you felt just totally overwhelmed because it's almost like, you know, landing in a foreign country on some method or on some level because it's so different than other forms of marketing. So these people really need a start-to-finish kind of education. They need help on how to design their booth to make it more attractive to attendees. They need techniques for gathering and managing leads. I mean, just pretty much they need help everywhere. All right, our second audience is corporate exhibit managers. And this group may tend to be a bit jaded or stuck in their ways. They kind of have a been there, done that attitude, and they think, you know, I've done this for years. But that doesn't mean they can't gain some fresh perspective on everything from pre-show promotion ideas, booth design, and just streamlining the whole process, or also cost savings. I mean, there's a lot of education that can either directly lead to cost savings or, help them see ways that they can save money on their exhibiting. So there's benefit there. And then the third group is the booth staff, which is probably the one audience that we would all agree probably needs the most education based on what we've seen at shows. This group, which includes salespeople, they might actually be just excellent at their regular job. But again, especially salespeople, when you put them in that trade show environment, it's foreign territory for them. Things don't work quite the same as what they're used to. And so they need some good training on how to engage and qualify attendees, how to behave in the booth, how to interact with the media that comes by, all of those kinds of things. So, there are different needs for each audience, but there are ways to meet that need across the board. So now I want to tell you just a little bit before we jump into what all exhibitor education includes. I want to touch on three things really quickly that it's not. But these are often what people, when they object and say, well, we don't need any education, these are the things they're probably thinking of. The first one is sales training. Well, ultimately, if you're having salespeople in your booth, they are good salespeople. They should already be good at their job. Again, it's just a matter of training them about how to operate in a different environment. The second thing that it's not is product knowledge. And again, the people working the booth should be familiar with products being displayed. All three of these items that we're going to talk about, it's good to cover. As an exhibitor or exhibit manager covering for your team in the booth, it's good to touch on these, but this is not the focus of the education. The third thing is general company information. Again, the people staffing your booth should be knowledgeable about your company and able to articulate the benefits, but that is not what we're talking about when we talk about in-depth exhibitor education. So what does education include? Well, first of all, it needs to be a holistic effort between show organizers and the exhibitor. Like I said, there are things that each side can be training on and providing training for, and so everybody works together to improve. So the first topic here under what education includes is probably the one thing that most people think of first, and that's interacting with attendees, and combine that with staff behavior. These two topics are, like I said, what most people think about. They're very important, teaching communication skills, how to engage and qualify and interact with the attendees. But that is not the only thing that exhibitor education includes. And a lot of times some of these things can be taken for granted, especially when it comes to staff behavior. But it's important things that need to be reviewed and taught, and especially if it's never been taught, somebody may be doing something wrong as far as the way they behave in the booth. We were kind of laughing before the call started about how many times we see people with their face buried in a phone. instead of actually interacting with people at a show. And, that's one of those simple things to address and teach people that that's not appropriate booth behavior. But like I said, that is not all there is. Another major topic that needs to be addressed is logistics. And that's everything from information about moving in and moving out, reviewing the service manual, and we're going to kind of ask our two experts here in just a minute about some of these things. But show labor, rules and regulations of the show, and even cost-saving tips, all of these kinds of things can come in under logistics. Next category is pre-show marketing, and here it can include things like marketing techniques and strategies, promotional tools that are available through the show, other kinds of marketing opportunities. Also, public relations opportunities can be covered here. And then lead management. And this includes things like how to define and qualify a lead, how to use the lead retrieval system that the show is providing, and then what happens to the leads that are gathered? How are they followed up? So these are what I call like the main building blocks of education, but then there's a lot of other topics. And some of these are subtopics within those, and some of them are other things like sustainability and social media and booth design. There's so many different things. But I want to toss to our two guest panelists and find out some of the topics that you include in your education. Tom, why don't you start with that one?
Well, thanks, Marlis. We try to, in general, break our content into what I would call operations, which addresses a lot of the things that you have there on the slide, logistics and things that are traditionally moving in, moving out, and operating within that show environment. And then we also have a track that, for lack of a better term, would just be considered marketing. But the marketing in the sense that pre-show marketing is critical today, and we probably give more emphasis to that because of what technology has done from our standpoint anyhow, and looking at the attendee to our show. They're coming in, they're spending less time, they have less time to devote at the show, and so they're real specific about setting agendas, who they want to see, what they want to see, and the analogy that I use often is that, for the exhibitor that assumes they can row their boat out in the middle of the lake and wait for the fish to jump in the boat, it's a long day. Where that same exhibitor, if they go out with their sonar, radar, and all the other tools that are available to help them catch fish, will find it to be a lot more productive. And it's a step I think we try to emphasize today is not being optional. It's really mandatory for success. There is to make sure that you're on the radar for the people you want to see before the show, and not to rely solely on traffic coming by your booth or fate. And so we still realize that operations are important because they're usually the surprise component of any exhibition where people either they're not aware of or they are not versed in something from an operations standpoint. The consequences on that financially can be pretty severe. And so we want to make sure that people do understand that and they get in and out efficiently. But also, at the end of the day, the results that they achieve, they have to measure. And so, post-show lead management and all of the things that you identify are important. And we realize, too, sometimes in our face-to-face, we can't fully and adequately cover all those topics, and that's where the webinar has been very helpful, because you can devote more time to one subject, and then it's there and it's portable, and people can access it when they need to.
That's a great point, Tom. I also want to point out, I'm seeing in the chat here that somebody was asking about the slides. Don't worry about having to copy down all of the words. I know I made this cute little tag cloud here. If you, at the end of the webinar, I'm going to give you my contact information. Just let me know. I will be happy to send you a copy of this infographic so that you have all of that. Even you can post in your office so you remember, or whatever you want to do with it. But yes, I will be happy to send you a copy of this graphic. So don't worry about taking too many notes on that. Kelly, let's go ahead and hear from you about some of the different topics you include in your exhibitor education.
Sure. Thanks, Marlis. Very similar to Tom. Pre-show marketing is huge with trade shows these days. I mean, we do so much to get attendees to the show, and then, we have to rely on those exhibitors to do their part. And so we have a couple of programs in place that are free of charge to the exhibitors, and we set up a couple of webinars to review that. We use the customer invite program, which allow exhibitors to send up to 3 emails free of charge. We also have a customer invite program where they have a comp code, and they can send that. They can use that up to 100 times free of charge for attendees to, register for free, complimentary of that exhibitor. And the other big thing that we like to educate people on are our exhibitor portals. We no longer offer a show directory. I don't think many shows offer show directories anymore. So we really try to encourage the exhibitors to fill out their exhibitor portals because it's the only way for attendees to find them. And like Tom said, time is of the essence. When these attendees come to the show, usually they're there for a day, maybe a day and a half. They're looking for certain exhibitors, and they want to just type in the name of the exhibitor, find them, and have all the information at their hands. So we really try to encourage exhibitors to do that. Another big thing, like you said, is staff behavior. We always try to have one on boothmanship, just quick what to do in your booth, what not to do in your booth. Some of them are so simple and you would think it was, common sense, common knowledge, but sometimes people just need that reminder. And then we also do an operations one closer to, our discount order deadline. Our show is very unique in our service manual. They get a 30% discount if they order by a certain deadline across the board on all services, most services. So we try to encourage them to make sure they reach that deadline, get the discount, and just on how to save money and have a great show, because at the end of the day, that's what we want, exhibitors to have a great show.
Well, exactly. And like you said, all of these different topics and different pieces connect together to make a successful show. I mean, you can train on any one category and still be missing things in some of the others. So it really, like I said, it's a really holistic education that needs to come from the show organizer, but also within the exhibiting companies themselves. So, and again, you're going to hear a lot more from both of these two panelists a little bit later, talking about some of the different ways that they offer education. But I want to move on to myth number 2. And I hear this one a lot, too. The best time for training is right before the show. And my response to that is, yes, that's one good time. But if you wait till that point to start, or if you focus only on training right before the show, it's way too late and you've really missed the boat. I mean, you heard from what Kelly and Tom were saying, that they really do. It's educating throughout the entire show planning cycle. Some exhibitor or some show organizers used to have their exhibitor workshops on setup day, and I've taught a lot of those workshops, and so I know that is not the good time to do it because the exhibitors are running in 95 million directions. They don't have time to sit down and focus on any training. And one time I remember they had me do training on the show floor, and I had to compete with the beeping forklift. So, doing training right before the show is not a good idea. It's a good idea to do a review, especially within your own exhibit, to do a quick review with your staff. But, that's not the point in time to start. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline. Basically, like I said, it's throughout the show cycle. So 4 to 6 months or even farther in advance, do training on booth design, pre-show marketing, logistics, all those types of things. From 1 to 3 months before, things like how to attract people to your booth, in-booth skills, the booth behavior we talked about a lot, lead management tips. All of those kinds of things are good to include as you get closer to the show. At the show itself, like I said, if you want to do kind of a prep session with your team the day before the show starts. That's a good thing to do. And then do daily debriefs so that you can make those mid-course corrections. You know, if something's not working, at the end of day one, change it up for day two and see if that improves things. And then post-show, which is a time when most people don't think about doing exhibitor education, but it still is important on an exhibit level, maybe not so much from the show, but for the exhibitors to do an event recap and really, talk with everybody who is on staff, get their feedback, and find out what you need to revamp for next time. Learn as you go along. It's a continual process. So it's important that, you don't skip the steps. All right, moving on to myth number 3. We don't have the time or resources within our staff. Now, this, some of you may have seen, we did a quick little informal poll on the TSNN LinkedIn group, and this was the number one answer, is that we don't have enough resources within our staff to provide education. And I think where this myth comes from is people have the impression that they have to do it all by themselves. And I think, Kelly and Tom, you don't do all of the exhibitor education all by yourself, do you?
From our standpoint, no, we sure don't. And as I mentioned earlier, we try to incorporate the experts, people like yourself that are focused on this type of training day to day. It's their living. It's what they're very passionate about. So, we want to make sure that we can offer the very best content and the best instructors, if you will, so that the exhibitors have the opportunity to take what we perceive to be the best content and put it in play, and things that that they can use when they leave the next day. Tools that they can use that are practical and allow them to tap into these resources going forward. Hopefully it's not just a 48-hour type of event where everything vanishes at the end, that they would feel comfortable and confident re-engaging with the resources as they get closer to the event.
Good
and
point.
Just to build on that, I would just say hiring outside resources like yourself adds credibility to the show and to what we're doing. I mean, I don't think people want to log in to hear me talk about, ordering services. I can tell them that on the phone, but when we hire outside people that really do this on a day-to-day basis, like yourself and like others, that can really give that knowledge, I think it speaks volumes for the trade show that, we're just saying we care so much about exhibitor education. We've hired these professionals to speak to you on, what they're most knowledgeable in.
Well, and I think part of where this comes from, too, not only are they feeling like they have to do it all alone, they don't realize, a lot of trade show organizers or exhibit managers don't realize where to turn for education. So I want to go ahead and jump into that next and talk about some of the different education options. And the first one being what I call hosted education days. And this is where both of you shine, because I know you provide this for your exhibitors. So I'd like to have you just share a little bit about how your hosted education days are structured and what that's all about. So, Kelly?
Sure. Our hosted education days, we've done them a little bit differently. This past year, we had, it was a one-day session, and we had 3 speakers. And so once you spoke on boothmanship, we had one speaker speak on social media, and it kind of gave us 3 different topics on, different areas of interest. And then we talked a little bit about operations and their portals. So we kind of touched on, referencing your earlier slide where there were 40 different things on there. We sort of, cookie crumb throughout the day a few different things, but focused specifically on, we hired 3 speakers and spoke specifically to their, specified interests. And I think we got great feedback. Our only problem is, we have, 1,600 exhibitors and we only get, 75 people in the room. So that's where we haven't figured out quite yet how to get them to the room.
Back to my point earlier about there's still a lot of room for improvement, right? There's still a lot of exhibitors that need the education.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, what about you? How about your education days?
Well, very similar to what Kelly had mentioned. We typically try to do it at a venue, in most cases at Chicago, just because it seems to be a venue that's easy to get to for most of the exhibitors in our show. And we usually do it a day or a day and a half. And as I mentioned earlier, we kind of structure it with an operations content and a marketing content. And what we've done here recently, which has really been the feedback on it's been terrific, is that we will typically field a panel of anywhere from 4 to 6 end users. And these are people that typically will attend our show and are serious buying authorities. And we try to facilitate with our professional to create a dialogue between those exhibitors that are attending the workshop and the attendee panel to understand better what their preferences are, what types of things turn them on, turn them off, what their expectations are relative to walking in the booth, what type of expertise they expect to see there, what their preference is for follow-up, and what it is that catches their eye to incite them to visit a booth. If it's criteria ranging from postcards, emails, social media, that type of thing, to their preferences, and it's a very free flowing type of conversation that goes on. But the important thing is that there are people in our industry oftentimes that will be tasked with setting up the booth and getting it prepared, and may not be there for the duration of the show, and may actually have very little interaction with the ultimate customer. And because they'll leave, the show opens and it's staffed by a different group of people. So the credibility of talking directly to a customer seems to be very, very important, and it's really changed the behaviors and for the positive for many of the people that attend the workshop. So
it really does make a lot of sense, because we can all stand up there and tell them all of these recommended ideas and things and what they should do and behavior and all that, but when they hear it from the people that are actually attending the show, somehow it clicks, I think, for them, and they're like, oh, this, because I was doing it this way, this really is keeping people out of my booth, or this would be so much better, a much better way to draw people in, or those kinds of things. So I think that's a great piece to include. Couple other ideas of some of the other shows that I've seen across the country, some of the things that they also include when they have these hosted education days. They may host them in the actual venue where the show is going to be held, so then they can do a tour and everybody can see exactly how the place is laid out, where the loading docks are, and special hospitality areas, or anything like that. So, and then another thing I don't believe either of you mentioned was going over sponsorship and marketing opportunities, and using that as a time to really recruit more exhibitors to be sponsors. It's another avenue for education. Let me just ask for both of you, who do you think typically attends? Are they new versus returning exhibitors, large versus small, or just pretty much a mix of everybody?
Well, speaking on behalf of our group, we have over the years developed a core group that always is there. I mean, these are people that come back, and they're certainly people that are knowledgeable, but they always seem to feel like there's something more to learn. Where we would like to do better than we have done is to attract more of the people that are first-timers, not necessarily in terms of their company exhibiting, but for this individual having that responsibility. As mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people who have picked up additional responsibilities over the last 6 years, but haven't discarded any. So they oftentimes don't have the the time to really devote to it like they would like to. And so we look at education as being, kind of a jump start to helping realizing that the time is limited. So we try to set a goal for each one of our workshops in terms of first time to our show, and try to reach out and make it easier for them to participate.
And Tom, you also offer an incentive for the exhibitors to attend your education day, the coupon book. You want to just tell us what that is?
Yeah, actually, it's something that we've had in play here for a long time now, and what it does is it literally is a coupon book that people receive when they come in, and it offers them a variety of different discounts from some of the providers, some of our partners at the show, all the way to sponsoring, sponsorship opportunities and other things that we offer here, with the idea being that if there's an out-of-pocket cost to traveling to Chicago, that we would like to offer as a minimum enough of a financial discount so that they can achieve, at least recover their costs in discounts for different items at the show to help offset their cost of being there.
I think that's a great idea. Kelly, I know you also have an incentive that you've offered in the past. So you want to go ahead and tell us who attends your training day and what kind of incentives you do?
Sure. Very similar to Tom. We always seem to have the same core group of people. It's a lot of times it's members of our board, it's members of our show committee. A few years ago, I remember when we did 6 webinars, I had an Excel spreadsheet with 6 pages of attendees, and we would look at it, and it would literally, like if 100 people attended the first one and 96 people attended the second one, there was always about 20 or 30, sometimes even as more as 40 repeating people. So it seemed to be a lot of the same people, but you know what? At the end of the day, if the same people are coming back, my hope is that they're learning something and that they see there's a need to come back and that they are making time out of their day to attend. So obviously, hopefully they're getting something out of it.
Well, and I was just going to say, I think that, like Tom said, by showing them that, for him it's by using the coupon book, but I think just educating them and showing them how they can be more efficient with their money and their time and their resources, they can see a ROI on spending for the investment of the training, whether it's the time spent to travel or to sit in and listen to a webinar. Absolutely. But there is a benefit there.
Absolutely. And our theory here, we don't have the coupon book as Tom was talking about. Our theory when it comes to, engaging people and giving them some sort of incentive is, do you want to incentivize the person for attending or do you want to incentivize the company? And we typically go with the actual person that attended, because if I'm going to attend a webinar and receive something, I would much rather receive it for myself as opposed to the company. So last year what we did was each person that attended our on-site or face-to-face meeting in Chicago received 1 complimentary ticket to our lecture series, which last year featured Dennis Miller and James Carville. So we actually incentivized the person that attended the meeting with a complimentary ticket to one of our sessions.
That's a really interesting benefit. Very, very unique and very inspiring, I would think, for the people that really motivates them. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move on. Talk a little bit about some of the other options or methods for education. Industry magazines, online publications as well. TSNN has a lot of great information. Webinars. Kudos to all of you who are on the line today or listening to this recording for taking time to participate in this webinar. TSNN has this wonderful series, and they have all different kinds of topics that are covered. So, be sure if you have missed some of the previous ones, go check out the archives and listen to some of those that, are on topics that pertain to you and what you're looking for. It's a really great way. But, both of our panelists have addressed that today, that they offer webinars because it's a really quick, easy, portable way that people can get education. And these webinars can be hosted not only by the show organizer, but there's also ones hosted by associations, publications like TSNN's. service providers and also professional trainers. So, there's a lot of webinars out there that you can tap into. Another thing is podcasts, which basically are like a more bite-sized version of a webinar. Kelly, I know you have a YouTube series. You want to tell us what that is?
We did that a few years ago, a podcast series, and the thing I love, and Tom has actually touched on this, all of our webinars we've put on our website so that exhibitors could go back and visit them. But a couple years ago, we did a series called 90 Seconds to a Better Pack Expo, and it was literally 90-second clips of, different things that we thought was important to tell the exhibitors. And actually, anybody can go to YouTube right now and put in 90 Seconds to a Better Pack Expo, and they're all there. So that's what I loved about doing that program is that, 3 years later, they're still there, and you can go back and you can tell exhibitors, because the information is still pertinent today. It's the same information. So that's why I love the podcast, because it was short, it was 90 seconds, and it's still there today if anybody wanted to.
Well, and some of those, because I didn't watch all of them, but I checked out a few of them, and some of them had hundreds of views. So people are actually going in and getting that. And like Kelly said, if you want to go to YouTube, I found if you just type Better Pack Expo in quotes, it'll bring it right up, and you can see all of the videos in the series for that. So I think that's an awesome idea. Next option is in-person workshops, which we talked a lot about the hosted education days. And what I'm talking about here with in-person workshops is slightly different in that it could be a large company incorporating exhibitor training into their national sales meeting, or local consumer expos. Also, they have the opportunity because most of their exhibitors are local. So they can have a luncheon workshop where exhibitors pay a small fee to attend, have lunch, learn some of the ins and outs about the show, and then, like Tom said, have a combination of operations and marketing tips also provided. So, but then again, there's a lot more ways that you can provide options in all kinds of price points. Like we said earlier, there's things you can do as a show organizer, things you can provide. There are things that the exhibitors themselves can provide. Like I said on the other word cloud infographic slide, if you want a copy of this, just contact me. I'm happy to send that to you. So, again, it can inspire you to maybe try some new types of training that you haven't thought about before. All right, so moving on, let's talk about who benefits. And some of these may not be ones that you've thought of. The first one will be booth staff. Obviously, they benefit because they do a better job and they feel more satisfied with what they've accomplished, and they don't feel like they've missed out on sales or opportunities at the show. The attendees they benefit because they have a positive experience and feel it was worth their time to attend the show. They're also more likely to return and to tell other people for future. Next one is the exhibit manager, and there's been studies done that show that 52% of exhibitors report an increase of leads by 20% or more if they've been trained. So, again, it's back to that 68% more effective. Well, now they get 20% or more leads than they do if they haven't been trained. So, again, there's a lot of benefits. Also, the exhibit manager will find that their team is happier and more productive, and they look good to their boss because of the better ROI and also because they outperform their competitors. So there's a lot of benefits there. And then obviously the show organizers benefit because successful exhibitors are more likely to be repeat exhibitors, possibly sign up for larger space or sponsorship. And then the last group that benefits that you may not have thought of is the industry vendors and show venues, because the vendors or the service providers are finding that better educated exhibitors see the value in the various services, and they're less likely to complain. They're also happier because, they understand why if you take advantage of the early bird discount, it saves instead of doing whatever at the end. And I think a lot of times, the reason exhibitors are unhappy and complain to the various service providers is because they don't really fully understand. And so part of that logistics training is going through and explaining. Like I know, having been a show organizer, I can't tell you how many times I had people come up to me on setup day and didn't realize that they were supposed to indicate that they needed electricity in advance, and then they were wondering why they didn't have any place to plug something in their booth. So things like that. There's so many different ways that people can be educated. Kelly and Tom, just real quick, because we're kind of getting low on time here, but what have you seen as far as benefits, just in a couple quick sentences?
I would just say an educated exhibitor is typically a happy exhibitor because they know they've educated themselves. They've ordered their services in advance. They know what to expect on the trade show floor.
I would echo those comments of Kelly's in the sense that they're most exhibitors are at the end of the day responsible for a significant expenditure to the show, and they're tasked with an ROI that has to justify being there and, more importantly, coming back. And if you can't measure it and don't understand it, it makes it very difficult.
Good point. I want to remind everybody again, if you've got questions, go ahead and type those in. We're going to get to those in just a minute, but I want to first go over real quick, what are some next steps that you can take? You've heard a lot of information today, and there's a lot of different methods and tools and topics, but what can you do? Well, first, you can participate in online forums. There's a lot of different trade show industry groups on LinkedIn, especially, that have very active discussions, and you can post questions and get feedback from other exhibitors and advice from professionals. The next thing is encourage your show organizers to provide education. I think a lot of times, going back to these 3 myths, a lot of show organizers have just either never thought about it or, like we said, they feel overwhelmed and they know they don't have the staff and the resources to provide all this education themselves. So give them that suggestion. Join industry associations because, again, they have a lot of educational opportunities offered. Subscribe to industry publications and blogs. Follow the TSNN webinar series. Watch some of those webinars and get up to speed on a lot of different topics. And then the last one is continue to the discussion online. Don't learn in a vacuum. And I think Tom mentioned this too. That's their goal with doing those training days, is they don't want people to just feel like, oh, hey, this is great, and then not use it. But make sure that you're continuing the discussion, moving the whole idea forward. Like I said, encouraging show organizers and even other exhibitors. Maybe not your competitors. You don't want them to be too well educated. But, tell other exhibitors about the options that are out there. And the bottom line really is that exhibitors plus education equals success and ROI. So pass it on. All right, I'm going to take a look here at questions. Let's see. Kelly, we have one for you. Do you think the reason that you don't have more exhibitors coming to hosted education day is because the exhibit staff has to pay to come to the site?
That might be it. I mean, the actual session is free to attend, but obviously travel. But like Tom said, our events are always in Chicago, which is pretty easy to get to in a day. So most of the time they don't have to spend the night, but they do incur the cost of getting to Chicago. But even when we did webinars, we didn't have, like I said, more than 100 people. And when you think about it, like for our current show, we have 1,300 exhibitors signed up right now. So to only get 100 is, we always like to improve that number.
Yeah. Well, and it is kind of hard to tell. I mean, unless you actually survey people why they're not participating. They may be buying into some of these myths of like, we already know what we're doing,
Sure.
So it's hard to know, really.
And it's also online, and they can always access it when it's convenient to them, because a lot of times 1 o'clock Eastern time or 2 o'clock is not, good for people. You just never know.
Right, and that's the advantage to like having this webinar archived, is people they can go back and listen to it again if they didn't catch everything, or like you said, it has more of that long-term opportunity for education.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Next question is, what promotional tools do you use to communicate the webinar and education sessions to your exhibitors? Tom?
We try to use, I guess, everything that is available to us, relative to using electronic media. We set up and create a web page that is dedicated to the event, and if it's a face-to-face, or even schedule webinars. We try to leverage our newsletter that goes out to people. We have face-to-face membership meetings in our case for the association. They're always promoted there. We like to feel that we haven't missed too many opportunities to communicate. In fact, sometimes that's one of the criticisms we receive is that we over-communicate, that we send too much information, and I guess that's it's a risk that you're willing to take if as Kelly mentioned, we ideally have about 750 companies that exhibit at our show, and boy, it'd be great to have an educational workshop where you had 700 companies represented there. That's, I guess, what keeps us going, is that we want to make sure we get the word out to as many people as possible. But that's we pretty much use all the traditional tools, if you will.
And that's like you said, you never know where people are going to be looking for the information, which I should say is another good reason to offer different types of education, because there's different learning styles, different personalities. I mean, maybe a webinar appeals to one person, whereas somebody else would prefer a more bite-sized podcast, or somebody else really prefers to have that face-to-face training. So, there's lots of different ways that you can approach it. Let's see, our next question, could the panelists please rank the 2 or 3 top requested or top attended education subjects that exhibitors find most beneficial?
Well, it's a great question. I know we do a survey after each one of our events as far as educational workshops. And, to be honest with you, it seems like it changes every year. Sometimes it has to do with, booth staffing, booth design. Other years it's pre-show marketing. Operations are probably the least that we get in terms of questions or topics. And then the end user thing has been consistent for us the last couple of years, where people seem to enjoy having the opportunity to create a dialogue face-to-face with a buyer or end user, if you will.
Kelly, how about you?
I'd have to agree with Tom, and I love his idea of the end user meeting. I think I might have to steal that one. But I would have to say the same thing. Operations is always sort of lowest on the totem pole, and pre-show marketing is huge. And I would also say ROI, return on investment. One of the things that we have noticed every single year, and it always amazes me, we post-show, after the show, we always get at least 1, if not 2 or 3 phone calls of attendees that have attended our show, handed their business card or let the exhibitor swipe their badge, and they never heard back from the exhibitor. And they're asking us, what booth was I in? I remember seeing blue carpet. And they have no idea. Like, they pretty much put the onus on the exhibitor. They said, here, contact me. And the exhibitor, 30, 60, 90 days post-show, never contacted them. So one of the big things for us is to try to schedule one after the show, return on investment. And we have done that many years, where, 14, 21 days after the show, we have another webinar. Now you have all those leads. What do you do with them?
And that's a really good point, back to where I showed the timeline and talked about, the education comes at all stages. That post-show, it is really important that, exhibitors are not dropping the ball at that point.
Yeah, to Kelly's point, I think we do a pretty comprehensive survey post-show through exhibit surveys, and we have a lot of confidence in their ability to kind of get the information that we need to get better. And one of the things that comes up always is, and it's kind of a frightening percentage of people that fit right into that scenario Kelly was talking about, where the exhibitor simply doesn't follow up, and the the attendee is expecting them to. So I don't know if that's a communication thing within the booth, or if it's just the wrong people handling it, or lack of a system on the exhibitor's part to make sure that these people are conducted. One of the things that we have in our industry is we have about well, maybe 50% of the people sell to the end user via channel partner, distributor, dealer, or reseller. And I think oftentimes there's a disconnect between the exhibitor, who is a manufacturer, and they basically wholesale those leads out to their distributors and resellers with no accountability. And so, there's no feedback provided. There's no insurance that this thing actually got done. Conversely, there's some that do a superb job of that and have got a wonderful system in place. But there's still, I think, a lot of work to be done to make sure at the end of the day that attendee receives in a timely manner what they're looking for. Because ultimately they tell us that if they don't, they still have a project, they still have needs. So, it's frustrating to them, but they oftentimes have an option, and they just go to the next option. So you hate for the exhibitor not to have a shot at that just simply by not having the mechanism to follow up.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and again, it goes back to showing that there's education needed in a lot of different areas. We got a couple more questions. I wanted to just put up my contact information. You can track me down on any of the major social media networks. Also, if you haven't grabbed a copy of the Exhibitor Education Manifesto, there's the address there for exhibitmarketerscafe.com/manifesto. You can go grab that. A couple last-minute questions here I'll try to breeze through real quick. Do you use a LinkedIn group for your exhibitors? Just yes or no, both of you?
Yes.
Yes, I believe we do.
Okay, so that's another way that you can push that information out. How long do these education sessions last on average? Well, I think the answer to that would probably be all different kinds of lengths. I mean, like we talked about the podcast, Kelly, your group does those in 90 seconds or less. The webinars, like we did today, was an hour. That's kind of standard. The on-site hosted education days, Kelly, yours is 1 day. Tom, yours is 2, I believe, correct?
Well, we've done them as compact as 1 day, which is really not enough time. And we find like our ideal format's about a day and a half. Okay.
All right. Well, I want to wrap this up. I want to thank my panelists, first of all, Kelly Faith and Tom Carbett. And thanks to TSNN for hosting this monthly webinar series. Today's session, Busting the Myths of Exhibitor Education and Why Show Organizers Should Care, will be posted on tsnn.com/webinars. The recording will be posted here in a few days, so you'll get an email notifying you about that. And then I also want to thank OnStream Media for sponsoring today's webinar. And thanks to all of you for attending.